additional increment it gave us.
Yep.
So we'll see if that
Right.
helps. We're just telling Glenn that our kickoff speaker tonight is Tony Usabelli.
All right. Good man.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Monday morning, and welcome to what
Whoa,
is
what's that? Welcome to those just joining in. We'll give folks a couple minutes to join for the Washington State Energy Strategy public hearing. All right, we'll give people just about one more minute or so, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us for the public hearing today on the Washington State Energy Strategy. Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody for joining in this evening. This is the public hearing on the Washington State Energy Strategy. We appreciate you joining. This is actually the second session today. We also had a session today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had quite a few people joining in at that time. So it's great to be back. We're going to do what we did this morning, which was to start off with just a little bit of an overview of the hearing and then some background information on the state energy strategy before we go into the comment period. And before we do the comments, I'll provide instructions for folks on what to expect and how to participate. But before we get started with that, what I'd like to do is start off with a welcome, and we've got a welcome today from Kendrick Stewart, the Deputy Director of the Washington State Department of Commerce.
First and foremost, on behalf of the Department of Commerce and our state, I want to thank each of you for taking the time to participate in the hearing today and for your interest in the state energy strategy. It's a really important document. Every day, Washingtonians feel the cost of our existing energy policies. Examples include the burden of heating costs for those who live in drafty and inefficient homes, the cost of moving communities and infrastructure out of harm's way due to rising sea level, the cost of families dealing with asthma, heart conditions, and other health impacts due to poor air quality, the loss of food availability, jobs, and livelihoods due to ocean acidification, and much more. These examples illustrate the cost of inaction. Because they are on the front line of the risks of climate change, highly impacted communities and vulnerable populations have much to gain from reductions in the state's greenhouse gas emissions and transition to 100% clean energy. Decarbonization presents many opportunities for policymakers and stakeholders to address inequities among the residents and communities in our state. These are laid out in the strategy. To transform our economy away from fossil fuels, we will need to invest in our homes, our businesses, our transportation systems, and our electricity grid. We need to develop new technologies for renewable energy, energy storage, and energy efficiency, and to invest in our workforce. There's real opportunity in the clean energy transformation. It's a vision that does right by our environment and protects future generations, but it also strengthens our communities and our families today and the day after and years after that. One thing that Governor Inslee has emphasized over many years is that economic transformation to clean energy provides a great opportunity to strengthen our economy through innovation and business development. The Department of Commerce provides many different programs to strengthen Washington communities. We have a specific division of the Agency for the Energy Policy and Programs, the Washington State Energy Office. But there's a thread of energy policy that runs through nearly all programs at our agency. Energy costs and quality play a role in housing, local government, economic development, and community outreach. And the draft energy strategy identifies broadband access as a key step to reaching our energy goals. Commerce's Broadband Office, Public Works Board, and our Community Economic Revitalization Board, or CURB, are all focused on expanding broadband infrastructure and service in all parts of our state. This will improve many aspects of our residents' lives, including their opportunity to benefit from the clean energy transition. The energy strategy lays out a roadmap for our state to achieve 3 goals identified by the legislature. One is to maintain energy prices that are fair and reasonable and support our economic success. A second is to foster a clean energy economy and jobs. Third, to meet the state's objective to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the analysis and conversation is not about whether we should pursue these objectives. Rather, it's about how we will do all 3. Meet our emissions reduction targets while maintaining an energy system that supports economic vitality and good jobs. This latter consideration is more important now than ever in the wake of the pandemic. Your input is important as we seek specific actions our state can take in the next decade to meet our emission limits. This is a challenge, a big one, but one filled with opportunity and promise. Thank you again for paying attention to this project and taking the time to participate in this important hearing.
All right. Again, thank you everybody for joining. It looks like several people joined in while we had the welcome. I want to take a moment here at the beginning to introduce some of the folks that are here at the hearing who've been involved in developing the Washington State Energy Strategy. First of all, we have Michael Furse, Assistant Director for the Energy Division with the Washington State Department of Commerce. And Michael is joined by 2 of his colleagues, Glenn Blackman and Kate Kelly, also at the Department of Commerce, who've been instrumental in developing the draft energy strategy. Michael, do you want to say a few words here at the start?
Thanks, Tom. I think Kendrick said, I think he said it right. And I just want to take the time to thank you for being here this evening to give us your comments and feedback on our plan for Washington's clean, affordable, and just energy future, and also to thank the team that helped put this together. Many hands went into this project over the course of the year, and I look forward to the comments that you'll have this evening. Tom?
Great, thank you, Michael. And I'd also like to introduce Nancy Hirsch, who is one of 2 co-chairs for the Energy Strategy Advisory Committee that worked over the course of the year to advise on the energy strategy development. And Nancy and her colleague Reeves Clifford helped guide the group over the course of the year. And I think we've got some of the members from the advisory committee also on the hearing today who are eager to hear comments. Nancy, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Good evening, all, and thank you for participating in this public hearing. I'd just like to share that the advisory committee is a broad cross-section of stakeholders from across the state, although not every stakeholder, and we recognize that your input is really critical. The advisory committee provided feedback and education and outreach to the Commerce and their technical team, the Clean Energy Transition Institute. And the draft strategy really reflects that tremendous investment in research, modeling, and analysis that all of those folks at Commerce and their consulting team did. And also the input and feedback of the advisory committee. And, it points out the significant opportunities and the challenges, as we heard from Kendrick, facing the state as it meets the legislatively mandated greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And hearing your input today is a critical piece of that outreach and education for the Commerce team. So thank you very much for participating. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks. Tom?
Great, thanks, Nancy. And I should introduce myself. I'm Tom Byerly with Ross Strategic. We helped facilitate the advisory committee over the course of the year, and I'll be facilitating tonight and helping people participate and share your thoughts about the energy strategy. I'm just going to say a little bit about the hearing format here in a minute, and then what we'll do is turn to an overview of the Washington State energy strategy. We have a video overview of the kind of main highlights of the strategy that we'll go through, and then we'll turn to the public comment period. And before we jump into that, I'll provide some guidelines for participation and sort of a how-to to make sure everybody can participate effectively. And we'll go as long as it takes tonight to go through comments. So what we'd like to do is invite people to make up to 3-minute statements using Zoom. I'll let you know when it's about time to wrap things up. Several people signed up to provide comments before the hearing tonight. So we'll start with people who signed up prior to the hearing, but it's okay if you did not sign up. We'll have time at the end for anybody else that would like to make a statement. Want you to know that the hearing is being recorded and it'll be posted to the Washington State Energy Strategy website. You can also find there all the meeting materials and recordings from all of the advisory committee meetings that happened over the course of the year. The hearing's also being streamed on the Department of Commerce YouTube channel, and so there may be people watching in that way. In addition to the verbal comments today, we encourage members of the public to submit written comments to energystrategy@commerce.wa.gov. Even if you do provide verbal comments tonight, having a written version sent to Commerce would be helpful. But for those who don't want to provide verbal comments, providing those in writing is just fine as well. We're asking those by the end of this week, Friday, December 11th. The energy strategy is due to be submitted at the end of this month. So having those comments in sooner rather than later is most helpful for the revisions. And I do want to let people know that if you provide written or oral comments and there's associated contact information such as address, phone, email, etc., that'll become a part of the public record. All right. Let's see, and I think Andy, my colleague Andy Chin, who's with me, is going to post in the chat here, maybe during the video, the list of commenters that we have signed up for tonight. So if you're wondering where you are in the queue, the chat will help with that. I know from what we did this afternoon that moved around a little bit, but it'll give you a sense of things here at the get-go. So what we'd like to do now is just provide an overview of the Washington State energy strategy that's currently in version 2.0 draft. And this is a video that Michael Furze and Glenn Blackman provided just a couple of days ago to the Washington State Legislature, the Senate Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee. So this overview is about 15 minutes long or so. You'll see a few places where they refer to committee members and presentations to follow, but just know that was because that was for a committee audience at the time. So.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Michael Furze, and I'm an assistant director at the Department of Commerce. The team that I lead is our energy division, and Glenn Blackman, who's leader for the policy office, is with me here today. Chair Carlisle, committee members, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the soon-to-be completed 2021 state energy strategy. Next slide, please. As you know, Commerce has got a diverse portfolio, and that is something that enables us to partner effectively with communities across the state. Our work spans from affordable housing to supporting international trade. Under Director Brown's leadership, we've played a key role in response to the pandemic, distributing over $800 million in CARES Act funding to get it out to needed activities across the state. And all this puts us in a unique position to partner with different communities to help achieve the state's clean energy future. Next slide, please. So in 2019, the legislature asked us to develop a new state energy strategy as part of CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act that was passed in 2019. And there were two key elements as part of the work that we need to do for the state energy strategy. The first is to meet the requirements of CETA as it relates to clean electricity. And the second is to meet the state greenhouse gas emissions targets. And the good news is that we can do it. We need to rethink how we use energy in all aspects of our economy, and we need to hustle, but we can do it. The change is one that's akin to a fundamental shift in how we use energy, and it's one that can be hard to imagine. And so for me, I like to think back and look at similar shifts that I can understand in my lifetime, from textbook to e-reader, from landline to smartphone. And then given the breadth of your committee, Mr. Chair, thinking about the internet, which 30 years ago was being deployed outside of the Defense Department for the first time, and it's now bringing us together safely in the pandemic on platforms like Zoom. So that's the type of shift that we are thinking through when it comes to the state energy strategy. Next slide, please. And we can do it while considering these cross-cutting realities of Washington's clean energy economy, the need for fair prices, for sufficient supply of electricity and energy, for workforce development needs. We also need to think differently about how we address the needs of low-income and vulnerable populations in ways that we have not done before. And we need to do that while accounting for and responding to the differences between the urban and rural communities in our state. Next slide. We can achieve the goals that you laid out for us in the state energy strategy thanks to the composition of our state energy strategy advisory committee, which was expanded since the last time we did this over a decade ago. And I want to provide some special thanks to two members of your committee who brought your expertise and perspective to help shape our strategy, Senator Sheldon and Chair Carlisle. It's a lot of work to develop a state energy strategy. Thank you for your time and your energy. I'm going to turn it over to Glenn on the next slide, and he's going to talk about the approach that Commerce has taken to the state energy strategy.
Thank you, Michael. And so I'm going to briefly go over the framework for the energy strategy analysis itself. Next slide, please. This illustrates kind of the energy flows within our economy today. On the left, you see the different forms of energy that are used in the state, and the size of the box corresponds to how much of that form of energy that we use. You see petroleum is the largest and natural gas is the second largest. And then those two, along with coal, are the primary sources of our greenhouse gas emissions. The strategy is organized around the pink boxes over on the right-hand side. Those are the end-use sectors, the different activities where we use energy. And you can see over there that transportation is our biggest energy use in the state. And if you look at this on a carbon emissions basis, it's even more predominant because basically no renewable energy today is being used for transportation, or very little. And then in addition to these four end-use areas, we look at electricity generation, which is the goldenrod box toward the top. So those are the kind of the way the energy strategy is organized. Next slide, please. And then the targets that we're trying to meet are illustrated with the red dots in this chart over time. You see the 2020 level that we're at today, which is kind of our starting point. And then under the statutory emissions reduction limits, we need to achieve a 45% reduction by 2030. And then essentially reach a net zero emissions level by 2050. The bar chart on the left shows where the emissions are in terms of the sectors. You see electricity at the top, where CETA is already putting us on a track to eliminate those emissions over time. And then transportation becomes even more prominent in terms of where we need to do our work. The darker blue section at the bottom of that chart represents non-energy uses or emissions in the economy. Those are not addressed in the energy strategy, and they represent an area where we have to drive energy-related emissions even further because of the existence of those non-energy emissions.
Oh, my apologies. Let's see. We'll get back to where we were in the video.
Because basically no renewable energy today is being used for transportation, or very little. And then in addition to these four end-use areas, we look at electricity generation, which is the goldenrod box toward the top. So those are the kind of the way the energy strategy is organized. Next slide, please. And then the targets that we're trying to meet are illustrated with the red dots in this chart over time. You see the 2020 level that we're at today, which is kind of our starting point. And then under the statutory emissions reduction limits, we need to achieve a 45% reduction by 2030. And then essentially reach a net zero emissions level by 2050. The bar chart on the left shows where the emissions are in terms of the sectors. You see electricity at the top, where CETA is already putting us on a track to eliminate those emissions over time. And then transportation becomes even more prominent in terms of where we need to do our work. The darker blue section at the bottom of that chart represents non-energy uses or emissions in the economy. Those are not addressed in the energy strategy, and they represent an area where we have to drive energy-related emissions even further because of the existence of those non-energy emissions. Next slide, please. We analyzed this problem using a deep decarbonization pathway framework. This is an analytical method that we've used in the state before. You've seen a number of presentations from different groups over the years using this framework, where you try to reach a certain outcome, such as an emissions reduction level, by looking across every conceivable use of energy within the state and the technologies that are available and the costs of those technologies, and try to find the path through there that meets your objectives. By far the primary objective in any one of these is to meet those emissions reductions and to find the least cost method of doing that. I won't go through all these different scenarios, but you do see that we look at it with different alternatives in mind that have a different emphasis on different paths toward that future. And you see that here that in any of the scenarios that we look at, over time we need to use more electricity in our grid. That turns out to be a really fundamental conclusion of the strategy. Next slide, please. In addition to that energy modeling that I just described, we also were able to do some economic modeling to look at the likely effect of this strategy on the state's economy and workforce. And we consulted with a great number of technical experts beyond those in the on the advisory committee itself during this process. So that's a kind of an overview of the analytical framework itself. And now we're going to talk about some of the key strategies that are in the current draft. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So one of the central focus efforts that we had in the state energy strategy was thinking about how we can do this equitably. Equity played a much larger role than in past strategies. And part of that is due to the fact that the Environmental Justice Task Force work that you'll be hearing about directly after us was going on both before and simultaneously to the strategy process. And so we were able to learn a lot and borrow from the work there around community engagement and community mapping to help think through different ways to make the transition to the clean energy future in Washington more equitable. In addition to that, thinking through how we can support workers through this transition and sort of process elements for how we can work with different stakeholders to work through the details of implementing the ideas that are in the state energy strategy. All of that came from work that we shared with our colleagues at the Environmental Justice Task Force. In addition to that, maybe not entirely surprising given the way that we're communicating today, but the need for universal broadband access came through as a clear equity marker in our state energy strategy, both in terms of connecting people and connecting the type of technology that we will need to build out over the next 30 years. And I know that you'll hear more today from our colleague, Russ Elliott. Next slide, please.
In the electricity sector, it's become very important in this work that we strengthen and expand the electricity sector that we have. It plays a much larger role in our energy system in the future. It's a way that we can take renewable and non-emitting energy and use it in applications where today we need gasoline or natural gas, fossil fuels in some form other than electricity. So to do that, we need to add renewable generation, and we need to expand and strengthen the transmission system so that we can draw resources from a much broader area than just the state of Washington. The electric grid needs to be more flexible so that we can adjust our energy consumption, our loads, rather than having to turn on and turn off fossil fuel plants the way we manage the grid today. We need to make more use of market mechanisms so that we can get clean power at the lowest possible cost. And through all of this, we need to protect and enhance resource adequacy, which is one of the fundamental tenets of CETA. Next slide, please.
So Glenn alluded to the type of transformation that's going to happen in our transportation sector when he showed the diagram earlier in our presentation. I think that he said that right now there's not a lot of renewable energy that's being used in the transportation sector, and we think that's going to change quite a bit over the next 30 years. And in fact, there's a lot of work to do in the next 10 years to achieve the emissions targets that the state has. We're going to need to move people and goods more efficiently. And in order to get there, we're probably going to need to set targets and establish accountability mechanisms in order to move forward. Next slide, please.
The building sector includes our homes and our businesses, office buildings, anything that's not, like a factory, but it's where we use energy for heat, lighting, water heating, things like that. And the key message for the building sector is heat pumps. High efficiency heat pumps are a technology that has made just tremendous progress over the years and is ready for deployment in many different applications, whether it's heating water or heating the space in a building. And so, of course, those would use electricity and use it at much higher efficiency levels than what we would use to natural gas today in a furnace or a water heater. We also need to develop standards for new buildings and for existing buildings. And then we need to make the investments in the existing stock of buildings in order to remove the CO2 emissions from those buildings through efficiency and conversion to non-emitting energy forms. Next slide, please.
In the industrial sector, I think the opportunity is to achieve Washington's potential as a global leader in the clean energy economy. It gives us the opportunity to build on part of the array of industries in our state. And each industry that we have may require their own kind of appropriate pathway to participate in the clean energy future. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we think the next step there is thinking about improving the data and analytical capabilities that we have as a state that will enable us to fine-tune a clean energy industrial policy. Next slide.
And one more, please.
So the work of the strategy is not over. Our final public hearing is next Monday, December 7th. And from there, when the strategy is finalized and transmitted by the end of the year, then a different set of work begins to kind of identify and prioritize near-term actions that will help move us forward to the 2030 outcomes that we have in statute. We need to figure out kind of the roles and responsibilities and how to distribute the work amongst the participants. And we need to include communities in that in a way that we have done differently in getting the frontline perspective from vulnerable populations about how we should implement some of the ideas that are part of the state energy strategy and how they can benefit from those ideas. And we need to do this while recognizing the limitations that we have within the pandemic. And with that, more work will begin in 2021. Thank you for the opportunity to give you a high-level overview of the state energy strategy.
All right, thank you, everyone. Sorry for a little repeat on part of the video there. I want to say a little bit now as we move into the public comment time just about the comments themselves and what to expect for folks that would like to be able to make a statement. So everybody's muted unless speaking as a way to minimize the background noise. What we'll do when it's time for you to provide a statement is we'll unmute you and ask for the comment. If you'd like, you're able to share your video. You don't have to do that, but you have that option, and I'll walk through the controls for that in just a minute. If you are having any technical issues, please feel free to use the chat. The hosts for this meeting will see that, and I know some folks have been chatting and saying that they would like to provide comments, and that's great too. And we'll have time at the end after we run through the list of people that we know would like to provide statements to see if anybody else would like to join in. And at that point, we'll just ask people to raise your hands. And I'll do my best to let you know when you're in the queue to speak and just list off who's next and who will be following that so people can prepare. Just a couple of guidelines for the comments. We'd like people to begin by introducing yourself with your name and to the extent that it's relevant, your affiliation. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when we're at that point and ask you to wrap up. We'd like it if people could frame comments as statements rather than questions. Usually a question has a statement embedded within it. And we ask people not to use any disrespectful or attacking language during the meeting today, and to keep one verbal comment per person. As I outlined at the beginning, we have the opportunity for submitting written comments too. So if there's more that you would like to say than you're able to do in your commenting time, please go ahead and avail yourself of the opportunity to provide written comments as well. So I know depending on the technology people are using, it may look a little different on your screen, but more or less people who are participating should be seeing something like this today with a menu of options along the bottom. There are a couple that are relevant for our meeting. So for one, when we ask for people who would like to make statements that aren't already signed up. Raising your hand is the way to tell us, and that you can use the raise your hand function here as well. It is helpful for us if you are signed in to Zoom using the same name that you signed up with when you said you would like to make a statement. And if those aren't the same, I may ask you to raise your hand as well, so we can make sure to unmute you. And then again, if you want to have any or having any technical difficulties or want to chat with the host, please use the chat function. All right. When we call on you, there'll be a brief moment where you'll get a little sign that says you're rejoining, and that just means that you're rejoining the hearing in a way that allows you to unmute yourself and go on video. So when you go through that process, what you'll see is a menu bar at the bottom that has a bit more features, and the ones to look for are over on the left-hand side. That's the unmute button, and then the start video button if you'd like to go on video. And it takes just a couple seconds to move from one to the other. All right, so why don't I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my my slides here so we can get a better sense of each other, and we'll start with the statements. First in the queue tonight is Tony Usabelli, and after Tony, we'll have Jason Selwitz and then Doug Howell. All right, Tony, you're on if you'd like to unmute yourself. There we go. Tony, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
I guess the video does not work. It does not allow
Oh, okay. All right.
via
Well,
video. Thank you very much, Tom, and thanks to the Department of Commerce, the advisory committee, and the consultants for producing an excellent product of very high quality. My name is Tony Usabelli. No specific affiliation for these comments, but I am speaking from the perspective of being the former director of the Washington State Energy Office and involved in the development and the implementation of several earlier versions of the state energy strategy. And that is from that perspective that I want to make my comments this evening. My key comment and view from being involved in other state energy strategies is really the most important element on this is the ability to translate a strategy into a workable, detailed implementation plan. I think many of the previous state energy strategies, while many of the items in there were successfully achieved as we move forward, I think they were really more opportunistic in terms of here was something that came up, we used the strategy as a way to support opportunities in that area. I think this strategy really needs to be much more deliberative in focus. It needs to be much more detailed in terms of an implementation plan, and it needs to be highly democratic in the small d sense of inclusive, as was mentioned in the overview and has been included throughout this process, to include a broad range of those who will be required to implement the activities within the strategy, and in particular, those who will be impacted by that strategy. In order to achieve that, I would strongly recommend that the Department of Commerce add a relatively small chapter, but I think an important chapter to the existing document. And that chapter would provide and underscore this need for implementation. It is not an implementation plan. An implementation plan would be detailed and time consuming to put together, but really would be a roadmap that synthesizes and summarizes the elements that are necessary within this strategy to turn it into a document and a process that really achieves significant change in the energy and climate system in the state of Washington. The elements that I think are of particular note within that are a sense of what are the resources that would be necessary for commerce and for other entities to be able to step forward and actually put together an implementation plan that had some substance and meaningfulness to it. And it should also include at least 4 of the following elements. Talking about what needs to be in a plan about education, and in particular focusing on how an implementation plan should consider the role of the consumer, who will ultimately make most all of the decisions relative to our use of energy and our greenhouse gas emissions. How to engage, this is that small d, democratic engagement with vulnerable populations, consumers, low-income individuals, and others. Third, the measurement element, which has been brought up before, but I think cannot be underscored enough. That might include something such as a strong element in Governor Inslee's Results Washington program that focuses specifically on the state energy strategy and its implementation and systematically tracks progress or lack of progress towards that goal. And finally, a focus on coordination, I think, as Senator Carlisle mentioned in the hearing last week. How do you engage with other state agencies who have a key role in this? And in particular, how do you engage more broadly with the business community, the NGO communities, and other communities to determine roles and responsibilities? I think having such an element added to the strategy would clearly help answer a number of questions I think that will come up as people examine the strategy in terms of where do you go from here? How are you going to get done the ambitious strategic agenda that's established here? Thank you very much for considering my comments.
Great. Thank you, Tony. All righty. Let's see. Next up, we have Jason Selwitz, and then Doug Howell, and then Michael Laurie. Let's see. Jason, I am not seeing you here. If you are here and maybe participating under another name, this would be the time to speak. Let's see, I'm also seeing Brian Grunkmeyer raising his hand. And Brian, I know you were signed up for this morning, so why don't I unmute you, Brian?
Yes. Hello.
Brian, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, I'm Brian Grunkemeyer, the founder of Flex Charging, an electric vehicle managed charging service. And I appreciate the opportunity to chat. I had 2 thoughts here. First, whenever we use demand response, I think we need to think about this in a larger context. Demand response, as typically viewed by utilities, is something that you call about 6 times a year or 6 times a quarter, and it helps achieve your capacity needs. However, a better idea is simply, let's go move when devices use energy every day by default. An excellent example of this would be a program created around the electric smart hot water heaters that the BPA has been looking at in conjunction with PGE. So in terms of rulemaking and so forth, I'd just like the state to fully consider demand response one step along the journey and demand flexibility as a better approach. I think everyone's struggling with exactly how to evaluate that and place a dollar figure on it, but that's a question for a different day. Additionally, on the low carbon fuel standard, I like the idea of the clean fuel standard that has been proposed in Olympia and also through the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And I think that these could be very helpful for accelerating adoption of electric vehicles. One way to help here is we can help with the equity piece. Electric vehicles are really expensive right now. I think that one way to improve the situation is to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. And if you talk to anyone that works in the car industry, The best way to do that is to give people money off up front at the purchase time for the vehicle. The low carbon, the clean fuel standard credits could potentially be one way to do this. There needs to be one tweak to the proposed rules to make this work, and that's to allow drivers to get their credits first. And of course, this would also need the ability for aggregators to come along and help drivers collect their credits. And with this, I think we can help accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, which will help with attainment of air quality goals and also help us fight climate change at a faster rate. Please consider that in future rules. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Brian. Let's see. So next up, we have Doug Howell, Michael Laurie, and then there's several people who signed up who I'm not seeing on there. So I think we'll go from Michael Laurie to Raina Holtz. Let's see. So why don't we go to Doug Howell? There we go. Let's see, Doug, it looks like you're on mute. There we go. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Okay, that was a bit of a pause. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. My name is Doug Howell. I work for the Sierra Club. And I would first like to thank all of the members of the advisory committee and the staff and the consultants. I know you have put in a tremendous level of effort and really appreciate it. And the good work shows. I also would like to thank you for your focus on equity. The recent COVID pandemic has really shown us how much there are system inequities from all the systems we use, and really is appropriate for you to have that strong focus on equity. So I appreciate that. I have just two comments tonight. And the first is about some of the uncertainties we face. I was following earlier some of the work being done by the consultants, really trying to do some innovative modeling and really doing an incredible depth of work. And it's still very hard to say what the future is going to be in 30 years from now. Uncertainties with technology and cost, and even how our tolerance for inaction is going to change as climate impacts grow. So what my first comment is that, you know, we must be willing to take bold actions even in the face of uncertainty. That really comes clear to me from the work that's been done by all of you. The second thing is, I really believe that I really like the way that Tony Isabelli laid out all the implementation pieces, and I'd like to add one to that. I think that we really need to call upon our business leaders to step up, and that really I would encourage the advisory committee members to be part of that. What we need from our business leaders are clear public statements in support of the climate goals, and most importantly, the near-term goal of 45% reduction by 2030. We did an assessment a year or so ago about some of the biggest climate polluters of the businesses in Washington State, and we also included upstream emissions for both gas and oil. Very tough to do. But we had a good enough sense that we thought British Petroleum, Puget Sound Energy, with both their gas and electric side, was probably in the very top of the polluters and maybe have been number 1 and 2. So I'd like to just focus on Puget Sound Energy for now. We know because of our new Clean Energy Transformation Act that we're going to be addressing the problems in electricity. So where we really need big, important companies like Puget is to step up in the areas in the gas utilities. And it's most important on the requirements for the 45% reductions by 2030. In the early signs from Puget Sound Energy in their integrated resource plan, we're not there. In fact, we're very far from it. In an October 14 presentation on gas on their load forecast over the next 20 years, they're showing no reduction in use of gas. Now, it is a load forecast. They actually have some growth in the forecast, and then they expect to back that out with some demand side resources, and most typically demand side resources are barely enough to just keep load flat. So now it's really incumbent upon Puget to show tremendous gains, amazing gains they're going to need to do with energy efficiency, demand response, and fuel switching. We're concerned that's not going to happen, not by the draft that's due in January. If they're going to come anywhere close to being in parity with our state goals. This summer, before the Utilities and Transportation Commission,
Doug, it's about time to start wrapping up.
Okay. Mary Kipp, Puget Sound Energy, CEO for Puget Sound, said she came to PSC to lead decarbonization. Well, if that's the case, then they're going to have to make some pretty drastic changes, and they're going to need all of you to help Mary get there by calling upon her to make a public statement that they embrace the 45% reduction by 2030. Thank you, all of you, for all your good work, and I hope you can be part of the team that helps encourage our leaders like Mary to step up and make the declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. All right, next up we have Michael Laurie, and then we'll go to Raina Holtz and Ann Newcomb. Hi, Michael. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. Thank you very much for working on this plan and giving me this opportunity to present. So my name is Michael Laurie. I work at my company, Watershed LLC. I've worked on thousands of energy and water efficiency and green building projects in 22 states and 2 other countries. And I have worked on many projects in Western Washington, including having been a consultant to Puget Sound Energy and their commercial and residential energy efficiency programs. I want to build on some of what Doug said earlier and focus on commenting on Puget Sound Energy's lack of leadership in addressing and planning for meeting the goals of the Washington State Energy Plan. First, on the electric side, they canceled their 2020 RFP for new capacity and demand response resources. I suspect they did that because they feel they have enough resources to meet their needs. But if Puget Sound Energy is going to be an active partner in meeting the goal of a 45% reduction in fossil fuel use by 2030, they will need to aggressively put in place more renewable energy resources, more energy efficiency, and more demand management systems. And an added reason why this is needed now is because Colstrip units 3 and 4, those are the coal plants, are likely to close sooner than 2025. And if that happens, it looks like they are thinking that they will build more gas plants to replace coal. But it will not be possible for them to reduce their fossil fuel use 45% in 10 years if they build more gas plants. And while gas plants can be built relatively quickly, expanding Puget Sound's energy's renewable energy resources will require more time to put the necessary pieces in place, including battery and other storage systems, demand control systems, including implementing time of day rates and programs to fund control of hot water tanks, and a wider range of renewable resources in a variety of locations to be able to have a higher percentage of the renewable resources producing power at any given time. Now to the gas side. For Puget to be a responsible climate-friendly partner, they will also have to reduce their fossil fuel use 45% in this sector by 2030. But as Doug referred to, they are currently proposing 0 reductions in their gas sales for the next 20 years. There are multiple ways they could reduce the demand for natural gas. They could support laws like the one just passed in Seattle that bans natural gas heating in new commercial and multifamily buildings and bans natural gas hot water in most commercial and multifamily buildings. They could provide rebates to their customers for switching from natural gas heat and hot water to electric heat and hot water, specifically heat pump heat and hot water. They could also stop providing rebates to customers for putting in more efficient natural gas heating and hot water systems. The worry many of us have who have been looking at Puget's insufficient effort on this front is that when push comes to shove, they will decide they quickly need new resources, and they will claim that they don't have enough time to do that with renewable energy, and so they'll build more natural gas plants.
Michael, it's about time to start wrapping up.
Okay, I've got like 2 sentences left. But if they take aggressive action now, they can avoid this further commitment to climate disastrous energy sources. Thank you very much for this opportunity to comment. Happy holidays.
Great. Thank you, Michael. All righty. Let's see. So next up, we have Raina Holtz, who will be followed by Ann Newcomb and then Anne Marie Dooley. Raina, go ahead. You may need to go off of mute.
Yeah, can you hear me? I think I am on.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I've been reading through the report and am really impressed at its breadth and its detail. I'm very excited about it, actually. One of the things that strikes me is that I was expecting, along with all of the equity part, that there would be more attention paid to opportunities for pedestrians and not e-bike riders, but regular, ordinary bike riders. More emphasis on providing special bike lanes, really safe and separate bike and pedestrian lanes. Things like Eugene, Oregon has done, where there are actually literally trails and little bridges that go over and around difficult traffic situations. It's enabling people who are moving from one congested city place where they live to another congested city place where they work to literally use no fuel other than their own physical energy. That's my first comment. My other main comment is that I was also hoping that just as COVID has introduced this complete hiatus in our ordinary lives, that the effort to quickly move to much lower greenhouse gases would be enough impetus to move towards coordinating nationally our woeful rail network. I have been a fan of railroads since I was a small child, and we really don't have a railroad anymore. All over the world, there are wonderful electric railroads, and a little group on Vashon Island wrote a book called Solutionary Rail by Bill Moyer, Patrick Mazza, etc., about how we could have electric rail. Private enterprise helped by collaborations with state authorities, hopefully around the country. And it could also become a corridor to move energy from where it exists, wind energy from the many places where we have wind energy, solar from the Southwest, places in the South where there's a lot of solar, have a grid that combines freight and transportation, as well as transmission lines to move power from where various types of power are abundant. And if that has not yet been looked at and considered, I urge you to pull that book into your deliberations. I think it would find a very good place here. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. All right, let's see. So now we have Ann Newcomb, who will be followed by Anne Marie Dooley and Lindsay Schroman Warren. Hi, Anne. I think if you go off mute, we'll be ready to go.
There we go.
Great.
Yeah, just thank you so much for hearing all of our comments today, and way to go creating this important energy strategy. I know it's taken a lot of work, and just want to compliment you on all of it. And I feel so lucky that we get to live in such a forward-thinking state who is coming up with excellent plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from so many angles. But I would like to say, I would like to see Washington update building codes as soon as possible. 2021 would be perfect to exclude all natural gas from all new construction. So I know change can be difficult for some, but this is a necessary step to help us meet our very important emissions reduction goals. Natural gas, and I know you probably all know this, but I'm going to say it because I think it's important to keep repeating these things. Natural gas is around 85% methane. In the first 2 decades after its release, methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. While methane doesn't linger as long in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, it is initially far more devastating to the climate because of how effectively it absorbs heat. Let's move away from natural gas as quickly as possible and keep everyone safe from methane emissions, gas explosions, spills, and poor air quality. So earlier I heard someone say that broadband to all shouldn't be on top of the list. But I would like to fully support your broadband to all mission for a lot of reasons, and here's a few. As we can see during this pandemic, reliable internet helps us avoid unnecessary automobile trips for many things like work, meetings, doctor visits, and school. We now see how important it is and how we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Continuing with the work from home ethic and meetings from home, which I love, will also reduce the need for buildings, leading to even more reduced emissions. Everyone should get to share in this vital resource. So any support of the regenerative agriculture is important. Regenerative agriculture sequesters large amounts of carbon dioxide, holds soil in place, reducing runoff and lost topsoil, and does not use fossil fuel-based fertilizers. And just to follow up, I can see the natural gas industry is very involved in this process, and I want to support commerce in staying strong and getting even stronger in moving away from all fossil fuels, including the very potent greenhouse gas, methane. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Anne.
time.
All right, next up we have Anne Marie Dooley, who will be followed by Lindsay Schroman Warren and then Nick Engelfried.
My name is Anne-Marie Dooley, and I'm a member of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'm speaking tonight as a concerned doctor, but also a practicing physician. I know we didn't prepare for this COVID pandemic because it wasn't profitable, and we're not preparing quickly enough for our climate crisis because of money invested in the status quo, and lives will be lost. The Washington State Energy Strategy states that costs to public health must be included in any climate action plan, especially for high impact communities whose health has often been sacrificed in favor of cheap energy. If that approach is genuine, we cannot allow the natural gas industry to slow immediate electrification of our buildings. Despite the gas industry's flim-flammery in painting natural gas as an environmentally friendly fuel, we know it is not. Even children's coloring books with happy titles like Color Your Way Through Natural Gas Down from Puget Sound Energy cannot convince us otherwise. Because nowhere in these happy images of natural gas town will you see the hospitals and clinics where children seek asthma treatment from their exposure to natural gas in the home. Gas-powered appliances in residential buildings threaten public health, particularly children's health, because turning on a gas stove is a bit like piping car exhaust into your kitchen. Small particulate matter includes carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, are released, both of which are linked to heart and lung problems. In fact, using a gas stove increases the risk of children in your home developing asthma symptoms by over 40%. So why is this strategy even discussing gas as a partial solution? This energy strategy lists 2 scenarios for the future. One includes natural gas and the other is complete electrification. Without total immediate electrification, I can see only one scenario ahead: more kids on inhalers and Black and brown communities afflicted by pollution and climate disaster. Both are a direct result of delayed action. We must electrify our buildings immediately, and we need legislative action to halt growth of the natural gas system now, not in 5 or 10 years. That means banning all new natural gas hookups in residential and commercial buildings. And that includes amending existing codes to allow local governments to do the same. The natural gas industry may worry about revenue lost, but I worry about lives lost now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. All right, next up we have Lindsay Schroman Warren, and then Nick Engelfried, and then Phil Jones.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Hi, thanks. Lindsay Schroman Warren. I'm in Port Angeles and Clallam, council member. I serve on the Utility Advisory Committee for the city. I'm also the current board chair for Clallam Transit and on the Strait Ecosystem Recovery Network, which is a local integrating organization of the Puget Sound Partnership. By making a comment in my personal capacity, I'm not for any entity. I want to give a case study on how we're trying to implement more renewable energy and electrification within Clallam Transit, so the public transit agency that provides public bus service on the Olympic Peninsula in Clallam County. We have several very long runs where buses go between, say, Port Angeles and Forks or Port Angeles and Bainbridge Island. And the current technology for electric battery buses does not allow us to do those routes the way that they're currently blocked. And also a lot of the agencies that are implementing electric buses tend to have a bus in reserve for every bus on the road. But because some of our buses are more than an hour away from our bus storage, it would be very hard to replace a bus on the road without a serious service interruption. So I provide those not as excuses for being slow to adopt electric buses, but rather to say that as we look at rolling out electrification of public transit, we need to look holistically at the transportation system. I think that if we provided more frequent bus service between Port Angeles and Forks, or particularly between Port Angeles and Bainbridge Island, we would see much higher reduction in greenhouse gas emissions because we would take a lot more single passenger automobiles off the road than we would by trying to electrify the buses. Now, I know electrifying the buses looks like a big target and is a government agency, and so it's kind of an easier low-hanging fruit. But if we're not looking holistically at the whole transportation system in a region, I think we might be missing the forest for the trees. And so I want us to move toward electrification of the buses, but not at the expense of frequency of service or reliability of service. And I think if we expand our public transit system, we potentially make better impacts in greenhouse gas emissions. The other comment related to that would be to look beyond just electric batteries and to hydrogen powered buses, such as Sunline Transit in California has been promoting. And I think that would help a lot with dwell time issues that we're facing with buses. And how do we hook up 20 or 30 buses in a single location overnight to charge fully? These are vehicles that are on the road almost all day long, and they can't have long dwell times to recharge batteries. So looking at other fuel sources like hydrogen would be really helpful for flexibility in implementing long-run rural bus service. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, next up we have Nick Engelfried and then Phil Jones, who will be followed by Frank Boykin. Hi, Nick, go ahead. Let's see, Nick, looks like you need to unmute yourself, or you might be muted locally. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. That's great.
Great, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Nick Engelfried. I live in Bellingham. Thank you to everyone who worked on this plan. And I just want to speak to my experience that sheds light on why this work is so important. I'm an environmental educator. I work with children, teens, and young adults, bringing them out to public lands in Northwest Washington. I'm speaking only on behalf of myself tonight, not any organization. But I want to say I do this work because I believe it's important young people feel safe in outdoor spaces and learn to care for the land in a way that respects environmental health. It's important to get them outside, away from screens. I've seen so many times young folks' faces light up after being outdoors for a while and having that break from computer time. And it's especially important right now when the outdoors is one of the few places people can socialize safely because of COVID. For some of the kids I work with, the time they spend in environmental ed programs is the only time they interact face-to-face with people their age right now. But I'm worried about whether 10 or 20 years from now, they will still be able to experience natural landscapes that are healthy or even livable. This September, during the unprecedented West Coast wildfires, environmental and outdoor education programs were canceled because it was unsafe to breathe outdoors. This when COVID was already leaving many people socially isolated and afraid to interact with each other. As climate change worsens, we're going to have more of these days, weeks, and maybe entire months like this when you can't go outside. And our only hope, as you all know, is to drastically curb emissions as quickly as possible. Washington State needs to lead the way in doing this. I wholeheartedly support the state energy strategy's goal of moving us away from fossil fuels to clean, affordable energy. I think that we can make it even stronger. It should make it clear that the days of building dirty, unneeded fossil energy infrastructure projects in Washington are over. Moving buildings away from natural gas as quickly as possible, as others have said, and it should clearly show how we're going to start rapidly decarbonizing as soon as possible, not decades from now. When I think about this work and the climate crisis, I think of the young people I work with and the world they're inheriting. Let's do the right thing for them and use this energy strategy to trigger as rapid a shift to clean energy as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. All right, next up we have Phil Jones, who will be followed by Frank Boykin and Tim Gould. Let's see, Phil, it looks like you may need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Thank you. My name is Phil Jones. I'm a former UTC commissioner, a lot of friends on this call. It's good to hear people tonight. But I come tonight representing the Alliance for Transportation Electrification, which is a national multi-sector organization that promotes the acceleration of EVs and transportation infrastructure. So just a few comments. First, I think electrification is key. And I think a lot of panelists and commenters have already focused on this. EPRI, E3, California studies have all shown that if we're going to decarbonize the economy, we need to electrify. Second, flexible load management is really important. I think Brian, some others talked about flexible load management, water heaters and such. We have a modern grid coming. So we need to encourage all end use cases where we can manage by utilities and aggregators and other technology companies these loads. And the third thing is transportation electrification. I know some of the commenters tonight are focused on natural gas and methane and decarbonization of the power sector. My comments are going to be focused on EVs and transportation electrification. Why? Because it's the low-hanging fruit. So as Tony Usabelli said, if we really want action, a roadmap and stuff to do over the next 5 to 10 years, we really need to focus on transportation electrification. So I'm focusing my remarks tonight on section C and pages 40 to 59 of your report. My main point tonight is be bolder, be more specific. So in the transportation section, there is no mention of a state goal, either a quantitative goal or a percentage of the fleet goal. So I would strongly urge you to consider an ambitious goal for light duty vehicles in the range of 750,000 to 1 million vehicles by 2030. Puget Sound Energy has taken some heat tonight for Colstrip and natural gas. But if you take a look at their TE plan, their transportation electrification plan, they are expecting 224,000 vehicles on the road just in their service territory by 2030 and 980,000 by 2050, which is the date for net zero carbon. So I would urge you to put a number or a percentage in there. Why? Because it gives guidance to the UTC, ecology, Commerce Department, and all of us who are working in the field. Secondly, it's not just vehicles, but you need to develop a specific goal for charging infrastructure. Governor Brown, the previous governor of California, talked about 250,000 charging ports by 2030, just in California. President-elect Biden has already mentioned 500,000 charging ports for the country. So I think if this plan is to be tangible and lead to a roadmap and implementation, as Tony said, you need to be a little more specific on what the goals are. Let the legislature deal with the specific goals. And
Phil, it's
lastly,
about time to start wrapping up.
Yeah. And lastly, I'm not going to get into the debate on fuel cells versus electricity and EVs tonight. I would just say that most members in my association and the industry believe that the EVs have kind of, they're really ahead in the race for light duty vehicle electrification. So I would urge you to focus on those. But for interstate long haul transport and longer haul applications, hydrogen fuel cells may have a role, but if we really want to do something in the next 5 to 10 years, let's focus on electric vehicles. Thank you for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Phil. All right, next up, we have Frank Boykin, and then Tim Gould, and then Jeanette McCaig. Frank, I think you just need to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Tom, can you hear me okay now?
We can. Yeah, that's great.
Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to share tonight. I am Frank Boykin, the director for the Manufacturing Industrial Council for the South Sound, a program of the Tacoma-Pierce County Chamber, representing more than 1,300 businesses. And on behalf of the member organizations for the South Sound, I offer the following comments and the perspective as it relates to the 2021 Washington State Energy Strategy processes and its culminating report. We very much so appreciate the consideration, work, and due diligence of everyone who had a role in the strategy development. It's rarely easy to ensure that all stakeholders have been heard. It's even more difficult to strike the right balance among those stakeholders. At MIC, we promote and enhance a healthy business climate economy for manufacturing, industry, and maritime-related businesses, as well as the industrial development and the jobs that support it. As a result, we're challenged by the adoption of a one-size-fits-all approach to electrifying every sector of the economy, dismissiveness toward potential technological advancements in other energy delivery pathways, and ignoring every action by industries to reduce emissions and conserve energy use. This approach will undoubtedly lead to increased costs and potential leakage of both industry and emissions. We're concerned and compelled to state that this culminating report, while comprehensive, does not strike the right balance for the manufacturing, industrial development, and the business communities which we represent. We're concerned that not enough development around resource reliability or adequacy, especially when it comes to lowering cost of electricity supply or industry dependent on fuel sources to achieve heat or direct flame application, have been considered. It's also unclear how the current strategy will encourage workforce development and secure more jobs when it only adds costs to the current economy and workforce. 2 lower paying jobs do not replace or make up for 1 higher paying family wage career opportunity. So as it's important to stretch ourselves, yes, and working to achieve the emission reduction goals that we all like to see in the state, we must ensure that the strategy doesn't pick and choose winners and losers and that preclude technological advancements that may achieve desired results at an overall greater benefit to the state's economy. So even with this, the MIC is confident that there is a way forward for a fairer, cleaner future. As the organizations we represent are dedicated to safeguarding and improving people's lives, creating a sustainable environment, and providing jobs that anchor Washington's economy, we're committed, and we absolutely stand with people who support local families. It's critical. Thank you so much for your time and your attention to this matter this evening.
Great. Thank you, Frank. All right, next we have Tim Gould, who'll be followed by Jeanette McCaig. And then we have Don Yanzik on the line. Don, I don't see your name on here, but if you're on by phone, you can hit *9 on your phone and that'll raise your hand and let us know that that's how you're participating. So why don't we go to Tim Gould? Let's see, Tim, there you go.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on the state energy strategy. I've done a lot of transit advocacy work on behalf of the Sierra Club, and also I'm a member of the Advisory Council for Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. Although this evening I'm making my comments purely as an individual and not representing any particular organization that I happen to do work with. I do want to address transportation specifically within the energy strategy. And one of the things that stands out about this is that I feel that there is not nearly enough recognition of the role that rail could play in getting us to a decarbonized transportation system. And one of the earlier commenters made reference to solutionary rail, and I also would like to bring that particular plan or concept forward as an example of what we could do with better use of rail for both passenger and freight in those key corridors that it serves. And one of the aspects of the plan that I think needs to be a little finer resolved is it needs to make a distinction between ultra high speed rail versus what I'll call higher speed rail, i.e. just upgrading the existing corridors and running trains at speeds perhaps in the range of 90 to 120 miles per hour, as opposed to the ultra high speed rail, such as what the legislature was having the Washington State Department of Transportation study over the last year or two. So it's the higher speed, i.e. upgrading the systems that we have that really offers the best opportunity to decarbonize in a time frame that really makes sense, which is essentially the next decade. Ultra high speed rail is going to take too long for it to really do us any good. But by upgrading existing rail lines, moving freight from truck to rail, which is a lot more energy efficient, and then look at electrifying those rail lines to be able to run electrified trains with overhead catenary. This would be a way that would help both freight and passenger sectors. And also those corridors could be additional energy transmission corridors allowing renewable energy to be moved from areas where the generation is plentiful, but the use is perhaps not so great, to those markets that could make use of that energy, like the Seattle area, Spokane, and so forth. So I'd just like to see a greater focus in the energy strategy on the use of rail for both passenger and freight, and especially electrified rail. And I would again call out the Solutionary Rail Plan as a very good example of how that could be done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. All right. Next, we have Jeanette McKay. And then one more call for Don Yanzik. Not seeing your name on here, but if you're participating by phone, let us know. You can do *9 on your phone, and that'll indicate to us. And then we follow that with Lael White. So why don't we go to Jeanette?
Oh, there we are.
There we go. Oh, there's Jeanette. We can hear you now, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Jeanette McCaig with Washington Realtors, an organization representing members involved in the residential and commercial real estate and their clients. Our membership works in both residential and, well, I said that, commercial real estate, and also property management. So we appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Just going to highlight a couple of items. We will provide a letter. And we are an organization that really, we believe in achieving energy efficiency, but we believe in doing so at a pace that can be achieved with homeowners and owners of buildings, making it easy for them to do the transition. One of the things we find about the strategy is that it's extremely ambitious and optimistic. And I think that is because that's the way the legislation was written, and the committee has really worked hard to follow that legislation. But I think in a time that we're working on right now under COVID, we've had a lot of people lose their jobs. We've had a lot of people lose their businesses. And it looks like that's going to get deeper. And when we look at some of the actions being proposed, such as very quickly, well, eliminating the natural gas hookups, as Seattle has done, apparently. One of the things that people look at is doing a point and sale requirement, so that those get changed out. The problem is, as has been mentioned earlier in testimony, is that you have to look at the implementation aspect. How easy will it be for people to do a change out? How hard will it be? What kind of impact will that have on moving housing product from one family to another, or not? And what does it do to the cost of housing, even new housing? And retrofits, again, doing retrofits and having high standards for energy retrofits, again, that's a point of sale kind of issue. And what we have found is that it's very difficult. It impacts how housing transactions occur or don't occur. And again, we're adding to a lot of costs on homeowners who right now, they've either, especially on middle and low income, they've lost their housing or they're about to. They've used up their savings. They've been surviving on debt. I mean, those are things that need to be taken into account as you look at the swiftness of implementing the actions of the strategy. So one of the things we'd like to do is just work a little with Commerce and others on the realities of what does this mean for families? because we're in a housing crisis right now. We're trying to get more housing supply built on the ground that is affordable to all income levels. And this,
Jeanette, it's about time to wrap up.
sure. And I would just say, we think that this, without a fiscal analysis of the strategy on the development of housing, we think this is going to have a huge impact on our individuals and families, especially middle and low income. So we'd like that consideration. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Lael White, and then Deanna Watson, and then Johnny Coker. So Lael White, will go to you. Lael, I think you just need to go off of mute. Let's see, Lael, if you'd like to speak the mute, you can go off mute using the little button on the lower left of your screen. Okay, Lael, why don't we come back to you? If you'd like, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Why don't we go to Deanna Watson?
Deanna doesn't have any comments.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you, Deanna. All right, let's see. So following Deanna, why don't we go to Johnny Coker, and then we'll have Karen Landsberg and Thomas White. Let's see, Johnny, it looks like you're on if you want to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hello.
Hi.
Cool. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Johnny Kocher, and I work in the Oakland office of Rocky Mountain Institute, an independent nonprofit working to shift towards a low-carbon future. I commend the Washington State Department of Commerce for drafting an ambitious energy strategy that seeks to determine a decarbonization pathway that is aligned with science of climate change. The report indicates that an economy-wide decarbonization with least societal costs would require a 95% reduction in building sector emissions by 2050, and the energy code being accelerated to become zero net energy, zero carbon, and all electric no later than the 2027 code cycle. While Washington is right about the importance of amending the building codes to meet climate goals, the code should not wait until 2027 to go all electric. Waiting until 2027 to require all electric buildings would make it difficult, if not impossible, for Washington to achieve its 2030 emissions targets, and making a 95% reduction by 2050 even more difficult. According to the State 2021 Energy Strategy, it typically takes 5 to 7 years from when a code passes to when it fully applies to all buildings coming into operation. Therefore, waiting until 2027 to require all electric would mean that buildings with fossil fuel equipment would be built into the mid-2030s. As RMI has documented in our recent report on new economics of electrifying buildings, all electric homes will immediately reduce emissions in the state of Washington and are cheaper to build. In Seattle, an all electric building costs $4,500 less than a mixed fuel building, mostly due to not having to pay the extra $2,100 to bring a gas connection to the building. Additionally, due to Washington's very clean electricity grid, an all electric building will immediately reduce carbon emissions as much as 93% compared to a mixed fuel building over a 15-year lifetime. By waiting 6 more years, we'd also be exposing our community to the health risks of gas pollution, such as greater asthma risk. The EPA has concluded that exposure to nitrogen dioxide causes respiratory harm, and homes with gas stoves have 50 to 400% higher concentrations of NO2 than homes with electric stoves. In fact, children living with a gas stove are 42% more likely to experience asthma symptoms and are 24% more likely to be diagnosed with asthma by a doctor compared to children living with electric stoves. This pollution is preventable, and we should be building all electric buildings now. The 2021 energy strategy report names a few other promising policy changes that could make a big difference in the state's ability to meet its own targets. Among them is the recommendation that the state should empower local governments to require more efficient and electrified new residential structures that is required by the state energy code. That is an encouraging recommendation we hope is changed in 2021. Finally, we hope that we encourage state officials to initiate actions congruently by convening a work group or task force to develop a just transition plan who may be adversely by workers who may be adversely impacted by the decline of direct gas use for heating buildings. It is pivotal to ensure that the implementation of the energy strategy will create job opportunities for these communities most in need while not harming those communities and industries that are in the current fossil fuel-based economy. The Washington Energy Strategy is an important roadmap for how the state of Washington will decarbonize its economy, and amending it to accelerate the adoption of building electrification is a key strategy to ensure that Washington reaches its 2030 and 2050 climate goals in a cost-effective manner that also improves the health of local communities. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Johnny. All right, and it looks like we might, for Leah White, it looks like we might have solved the muting issue. So let me see if we can do that. There we go.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I'm Leah White from Snohomish County. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments and on this very thoughtful strategic planning. I'm affiliated with several groups, but my comments are my own. I'm happy to see emphasis on the importance of transit and rail, but as others have said, I would like to see stronger emphasis on expanding our existing long distance and regional passenger rail. We have avoided expanding and improving our rail networks, even though we have had clear legislative mandate to do so. Please see RCW 47.79. Rail movement uses 2/3 less energy than any roadway vehicles. It also emits 2/3 fewer climate emissions, and that drops to 0 after electrification. All rail can be electrified. I'm happy to see the second draft dropped references to high-speed rail. We must be able to differentiate ultra-high-speed rail, or as this is called, ultra-high-speed transit development, or bullet trains, from expansion and improvement of our existing rail system, which can be implemented immediately. Ultra-high-speed rail requires entirely new infrastructure and right-of-way, which will be extremely costly, environmentally destructive, which will not serve intermediate or rural communities, will not address mobility justice or environmental justice, and which will take far too long to be operational, thereby doing nothing toward reducing climate emissions in the urgent short term. Please keep ultra-high-speed rail language out of the strategy. Finally, if I have time, lower intensity carbon liquid fuels are valuable for local pollution reduction, but they are still burning carbon as greenhouse gas and shouldn't be mistaken to be a climate solution. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Leo. All right, let's see. Next up, we have, let's see, Jeremy Wilson. Let's see, Jeremy, I'm not seeing your name via Zoom. There's a chance that you are on the phone. If that's the case, if you do *9 on your keypad, that'll let us know that you're on the phone. Let's see. So why don't we then go to Thomas White, and then we'll go to Patrick Binns after Thomas White. There we go, Thomas. Yeah, if you want to unmute yourself.
My name's Thomas White. I've got about 50 years of railroad operating experience. I'm representing merely myself. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Rail transportation requires 1/3 the energy of highway transportation. Any transportation that is moved from highway to rail will use 1/3 of the fuel and generate 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions. Merely converting current and future highway vehicles can solve greenhouse gas emissions, but other serious problems remain. Congestion and the need for new highway construction, the environmental, economic, and personal cost of traffic accidents, the need for an immense amount of new electric power generation, the eventual disposal of a large number of batteries. Although private ownership of railroad infrastructure and the federal regulation of railroads poses challenges, they do not preclude the innovative use of rail transportation. That may require an innovative approach. Washington State and Sound Transit contract with BNSF Railway to operate the Sounder commuter service and the Cascade service. The state of Washington also owns a grain train. Rail transportation approaches include extensive Vancouver to BC, Portland passenger service. Almost 30 years ago, Washington State embarked on such a program, but development was terminated. Comprehensive rail passenger service between Puget Sound region and central and eastern Washington, including comprehensive rail passenger service among the central and eastern Washington cities. Innovative short-haul freight service within the state of Washington and between Washington and Oregon, such as the truck shuttle trains that operate in the Alps and through the Channel Tunnel. Eventual electrification of the Washington rail network. Rail electrification does not need to be limited to battery locomotives. The Solutionary Rail program that has been mentioned provides examples of U.S. implementation. I've been working on parallel projects of that nature for about 3 decades. High-speed rail is not a climate emergency solution. The environmental process for high-speed rail infrastructure will take longer than the amount of time that we have to reduce emissions by 50%. High-speed rail is time and cost competitive with air travel. Conventional rail service is time and cost competitive with highway travel. The air travel in Washington State that is subject to the change to high-speed rail travel generates 0.001% of the greenhouse gas emissions of highway travel in the state. And with that, I yield my time.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. All right. Let's see. Next, why don't we go to Patrick Binns? Patrick?
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I commend you for the work you've done so far in creating the strategic energy plan. It's a very complex challenge facing the state. A couple comments I want to make because I feel it needs to strengthen some of the discussion in the plan. First and foremost is it's pretty clear that our plan to meet the clean energy targets really is driven by a transformation of the energy sector to a more electrification of both our vehicles, of building space and water heating, and then also the aggressive retirement of coal capacity, coal-fired generation capacity. And the issue is that we're creating both new loads with these transformations and having to replace existing loads with the coal-fired retirements. And yet I don't think we fully address the highly intermittent and seasonal variability of the renewable solar and onshore wind resources that are expected to supply the power. There is really mention of, but not a sufficient attention to, the status of battery storage systems, particularly the technological performance, the costs, and field operational experience with grid scale battery systems. And these are absolutely going to be essential if we're going to have a substantially more reliance on renewable solar and wind power sources. Secondly, we do address in the plan the need for looking at transmission flexibility and more capacity, because again, it will be essential to be able to reach high wind capacity regions like in Montana and Wyoming in order to provide some more reliable wind power to Washington's load centers. However, we also know that transmission facilities generally take 10+ years to plan, to work through environmental impact statements, ease of access, and all the rest. And we're also going to have to be working and cooperating with states like Wyoming and Montana that may not really have the same kind of perspective we have about the need for these transmission facilities. So I think we really have to focus on, if we're going to solve the intermittency and seasonal unreliability issues of renewables, we have to look at what's the quality of battery storage technology development and field testing of these systems, and our ability to transmit distant solar and wind resources to meet our future loads. So I think that's needs a little more attention than what it's gotten so far. Secondly, I believe that we really have to look at natural gas as a very valuable bridging fuel. I don't see, with the reliability issues and resource adequacy issues for the Western electric grid, that you can totally displace natural gas generating capacity for some time to come. Now, you may be able to have it run at very low times where you only use it for maybe dozens of hours a year, but then you're going to have some financial mechanism placed so that the utilities can afford to have something like that to support their needs for reliability. Otherwise, I think we really run the risk of damaging industrial, institutional, commercial access to power as well.
Patrick, it's about time to wrap up.
Okay, I would say the one final thing is that I think the plan is a little too overly optimistic about the reducing costs of battery storage and transmission, and you really need to get some more what I would call commercial grade evidence about what are the costs of these systems, because I didn't see anywhere in the plan where it really looks at how do you manage the cost to the consumer of all this transformation. It kind of is implied that there won't be a cost. And I think that's a very, very fallacious assumption. There will be costs more than what we see today. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Great, thank you, Patrick. All right, let's see. Dave Wilson, we have a sign up from you. I don't see your name here. It's a possibility that you're calling in on the phone. If that's the case, you can dial *9 on your keypad and let us know. All right. So that gets us to the bottom of the list of folks who signed up before the meeting today or signed up during the meeting. But I would invite anybody else that hasn't made a statement, that would like to make a statement, to do that now. If you raise your hand using the little raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, we can go ahead and bring you into the conversation. I'll just give people a few moments to think about that or do that. All righty. Well, I think we've heard from everybody that would like to make a statement tonight. So thank you all so much for taking part of your evening and sharing your thoughts with us. And thanks for those who listened to the other statements from others as well. We really appreciate it. Once more, if people have written comments, please do submit those by the end of the week. You can go to the Washington Department of Commerce Energy Strategy website and find the information there for the email address and how to submit comments. So with that, thank you everybody for participating.